interested in Buddhism, for anybody, start getting into the fundamental teachings, and one of them is, the Eightfold Path, and particularly in the Theravada tradition, and in the first couple parts of the Eightfold Path, skillful understanding and skillful thinking are kind of the intellectual part of Buddhism, part of the practice. The area of skillful thinking in the Eightfold Path, anyway, has everything to do with letting go. First of all, the three areas are letting go, loving kindness, and compassion. And letting go, we talked about last week, and we've talked about that, on and off for the last several months, I guess, and how important it is in our meditation practice. And then the loving kindness or loving friendliness, metta, we've also talked about that quite a bit on and off. But that's like an opening of the heart, in the meditation practice and the spirituality. And compassion is like a melting of the heart, where we have compassion for other people's feelings based on our past. So for example, if we hear that somebody, like a child, is being abused by their parents or something like that, and we can reflect on our own past and perhaps from our own experiences and kind of think of that in relation to this person this child that we're thinking of, and that's how the compassion works. It's not really taking on their suffering, but it is taking on a feeling, understanding what they're going through, the suffering of people or suffering of the world, being sensitive, to other people's situations. But there's another area that is a little bit off of the. I've never really heard it talked about in Buddhism, because skillful thinking, and from the Buddhist standpoint, is intentional thoughts, intentionally thinking of letting go or loving kindness or compassion, and any other thing really. Let me read something here from. This is from. You guys are probably familiar with 8 Mindful Steps to Happiness by Bhante Gunaratana. It's one of his classics. Just a little bit about. I'm always pulling out the old stuff that really makes me think. And skillful thinking is is definitely along those lines. But let me just read the first few lines here. It's no mystery that thinking can make us happy or miserable. Let's say you're sitting under a tree one fine spring day. Nothing particular happens to you except perhaps the breeze is ruffling your hair. Yet in your mind, you're far away. Maybe you're remembering another spring day several years back when you were feeling terrible. You had lost your job, you failed an exam, or your cat wandered off. That memory turns into a worry. And so we're worrying, like, what if I lose my job? Or why did I say such and such to so and so? And no doubt this or that will happen and I'll be out on my ear. Now, and just, the typical worrying, now I'm really in for it. How will I pay my bills? And so on. And one worry brings up another. which brings up yet another, and soon you feel like life is in shambles. But all the while, you're sitting underneath the tree, in the park, and that's just how our minds work. And then Bhante goes ahead and says that thinking. In skillful thinking, he says, thinking refers not only to thoughts, but to any intentional mind state as well. And mind states are moods and emotions, and these, not feelings, but the things that we can kind of conjure up for ourselves. Like we can, when we say the proper mantra, for example, we might have a way of bringing up some type of happiness for us. So it's an intentional thinking process that works for us. And so the kind of thinking that I'm referring to here, I haven't even brought it up yet, but what I'm referring to is the kind of thinking that isn't intentional. And there's kind of a practice. It's more of a suggestion than anything else, and it's imagining that we have these thought bubbles, like you see in comic books or something like that. And imagine that something happens to us. It could be anything, it could be right now. And just imagine what our thoughts are if they're actually printed out and we could see them, rather than just kind of taking them for granted, taking them for just the thoughts are there, and we can pay attention to them, or we can kind of pay attention to them, or we could just ignore them altogether. There's a lot of options as far as thoughts. But what if we actually did pay attention to them, but not in such a way that we have to become sensitive or emotional about them, but just being aware of them all the time. And I think it's a very good practice for us to do that intentionally. There might be times in our throughout our day where we are very intentional about our thoughts, but I venture to say that most of the time our thoughts are just happening. We're probably noticing them. Some of them we take seriously, some of them we don't. Some of them we might notice as very destructive thoughts, and some of them we might times notice that these thoughts are actually directing our life, but we're not paying any attention, we're not noticing that. And it occurred to me that what if we did have like a register of our thoughts, even when we're carrying on, let's say we're carrying on a conversation with somebody, and they say something, and in our mind we go, well, I could comment on that, but it's probably best not to because of, this past thing that has happened, or blah, 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 blah. How our mind works. It goes on and on like that. But what if we had a register at the end of the day, that we could read all of our thoughts, not things that we talked about or not things that we necessarily did, but all of the thoughts that came out. I think it would be extremely interesting to be able to see that. We probably wouldn't even recognize ourselves in many situations. So I think it's a good practice to at least try to take this in heart, try to keep this in mind while we're doing some of our meditation practice, because meditation is kind of an invitation to take this who we are-ness, and take it out in the world through our practice of meditation. The Eightfold Path in Buddhism talks about that, how we are conditioning ourselves for the world. And we do that, the best way to do that is through our meditation practice, through the practice of meditation. So I'd like to have us kind of think in terms of that when we do our meditation tonight. And I'll guide this meditation along those lines. I think I'll find it kind of interesting. I'm not sure how I'm going to do this yet, but we'll do it. And then we'll probably kind of have a deeper, quiet, a meditation. I'm going to put a little bit of music. I recorded something earlier that I'm going to, play for a little background music. I'll keep it real soft. And but the invitation is to notice our thoughts, just like if they're being dictated or being written down, or just like one of the thought bubbles. Okay, again, make yourself comfortable and gently close your eyes. Take a few nice deep breaths of air. Notice how that feels. Intentionally breathing. Just focus on that for a bit. Intentionally breathing. Notice the air coming in and going out. It's quite incredible when we think about intention. We had the intention to meditate tonight, to come here and meet like this. And whenever we sit and meditate, we bring our intention or attention to some area of the body. Generally, it's the breath for many of us. And so what this does, of course, is allow us to rest in the present moment. When we have this intention and we direct it to something, it changes the background of everything else. I had a friend come over to the house the other day, somebody that had never meditated before, and they wanted to learn meditation. So we sat down with them. And this person was directed to focus on their breath. And in doing so, it was very easy for this person to do that, as they mentioned later. Because it was a new subject for them. It was kind of exciting. They're able to focus their attention on one thing, and it seemed easy for them. I kind of look at it as beginner's luck. And I told them to watch out and be aware that when you try to do this daily, which it should be done daily, to have this daily practice, that chances are it won't be this easy all the time. It would be wonderful if it was. So we're directing our attention to something. That's why when we find something interesting, it's very easy for us to stay to it. When we find something inspiring, a project or something on the computer, whatever it might be, our attention is drawn there, and time seems to vanish. And it usually goes by very quickly when we review the aspect of time. because in presence, time has a completely different meaning. So if we can learn to direct this intention, which is something that we do when we practice meditation, and if we can learn to do that off of the cushion, the same way that we do it on the cushion, it can change our lives when it's done consistently. And one of those things is intentional thinking. And it's not really the thinking itself, but intentionally being aware. Noticing what we're thinking. And in this noticing, of course, it will change our thinking. And it can only change it for the better, such as in the area of morality. And this is an aspect of mindfulness. And mindfulness is this intentional awareness of something that is related to the mind, in this case, the thoughts and the thinking process, and what happens for us during this process. So this intention of thinking can start on the cushion. And it's a practice that I encourage people to do it throughout the day whenever they can. And try to keep it a formal practice for a while. In most situations, when we do it off the cushion, out in public, when we're dealing with other people, for example, we'll be having a smile put on our face for some very obvious reasons, which is that our thoughts are quite comical. Thinking is something that goes on in the background all of the time, constantly, even now. If we're aware of what we're thinking, it sometimes is in contrast, complete contrast to what we're doing. We might be carrying on a conversation with somebody, and actually we have the ability to be aware of our thoughts all the time while we're carrying on a conversation with others. We might be delivering a speech to hundreds of people, and we can be aware of our thoughts. It's an amazing thing that humans have this ability. So one of the ways that we can practice this is just see the thoughts written out like a manuscript, or like whatever feels most comfortable for us. Something in the line of a thought bubble, as mentioned, like something that we see in a comic book. Or we could see it written out on a chalkboard, like a blackboard of the mind. How the thoughts keep going on and on and on, regardless of what is happening. And the idea is to understand how much power these thoughts have on us, and how much they can change our lives if we have the intention to spend or place our awareness on these thoughts. The person that walks around all day reminding themselves that they're such a failure and I'll never be able to accomplish this, or I can't wait until this is over, I just want to get back home and be away from people and sit in front of the TV and not have to worry about any of this, all the different things that go through our minds throughout the day. If we pay attention to these things, we can notice the negativity that comes from the mind. And in that noticing, it changes. The awareness of this changes the thought process. It's that simple. Intentional thinking is really quite easy to do. We do it through awareness. It's like being aware of what we're speaking about to somebody. And our thoughts is our conversation with ourselves. And if we don't recognize that this is going on, we don't recognize and notice what is being told, we take this in. We take this to heart. We take it into the subconscious mind. And we live it, regardless of whether we want to or not. So for the next 15 or 20 minutes or so, I encourage you to sit in silence and try to notice to your best ability the thought process behind the practice, what is happening. And of course, for a meditation practice, if we can corral those thoughts and keep them confined to the practice, to whatever we're focusing on, such as the breath, and use whatever abilities or whatever methods we have to calm the thinking mind and actually get an opportunity to see how this works for us. To calm the mind, notice the thoughts, and see what the mind does when we are in presence. And see if this awareness, being aware of the thoughts, can actually slow down the thinking, slow down the subject, slow down the story. And if so, see how slow it can get. Maybe the thinking can even stop. So see how this works for you. Bring your attention to the breath or some aspect of the body and notice the thoughts, the thinking. minutes of this meditation, just think in terms of what comes to mind right now when this meditation is coming to an end. What comes across just in the areas of thoughts. May each one of us and all beings be well, happy, and peaceful. May no harm come to us. May no difficulties come to us. May we all meet with spiritual and worldly success. May we have the patience, courage, and understanding to meet and overcome any problems, any difficulties that we might have in life. So I hope that meditation was a good one for you. I'm curious to see if it was at all, if it seemed different than any of the other meditations for you. With the idea of that we should be watching our thoughts, and maybe we're doing that all the time. The idea of being mindful, we can ask ourselves, is it just that? Is it just watching our thoughts? Or is there a little bit more to it than that? Is it being attentive to the stuff in the mind, the thinking process? When we get the opportunity to notice the thoughts after a long duration of a busy day or busy week, that kind of thing, where we don't have the opportunity to be by ourselves, I guess you could say. We really, there's some of those times where we really feel like we want to be alone, like no music in the background, no radio or any kind of media. No television. I know that's true for me anyway. I know that for a lot of people, they have difficulty without that too. They have difficulty without that background turbulence. That's what I call it anyway. Happening all the time. And but I think we owe it to ourselves, to be able to have those quiet times, and that's what meditation's about. And so to be able to look at the thoughts, to be able to notice the thoughts, and how that can really change our lives and be advantageous for us to do that. I mean, for the most part, we might feel like we are aware of our thoughts, but it'd be interesting to see some kind of a barometer or something, like what percentage of the thoughts during our awakened period of our days, the 16 hours that we're awake, what percent are we actually aware, of what's going on in the mind, or is it just going on back there, just like some little guy in the background, trying to get us in trouble, and just saying negative things to us, or things that aren't advantageous for us anyway.